Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining this session. We're really pleased to have you all here so we can explore how to retain more women in tech, with today having a focus on unpaid carers. We'll start off with some intros and then we can dive right in. So I'll start. I'm Harriet Linus. I'm an interactive manager at Virgin Media O2, and I've been one of the chairs of the Women's Network for over a year. The reason why I'm here today is we want to raise awareness of the disproportionate number of women leaving the workplace to focus on caring responsibilities. We know that 59% of carers are women, and over the next decade, the UK will increasingly rely on unpaid carers, with nearly 1 million more people to take on caring responsibilities by 2035. We've collaborated with Reed and the We Care Network so we can focus on how we retain women by addressing challenges such as work-life balance and unconscious bias. Working together, we want to help people receive the support they need and to stay and succeed in the industry. It's not just about targets, it's about supporting our colleagues and making sure everyone feels included. For me, today is all about how we can learn and support each other. So, as Kevin said, this is our first one, and hopefully a programme we're going to run throughout the year with a different focus each time. I'm going to pass over to Luke, who is also co-hosting this session.
Thank you, Harriet, and thank you so much for supporting this. We're really excited to be here. My name's Luke Martin. I chair the We Care Network for Virgin Media O2. So we support our unpaid caring community, thriving both at work and at home. One of our key focus areas for this year has been supporting our female population, because a larger proportion of our workforce do provide unpaid caring responsibilities. The reason that I got involved in the network is that my brother is disabled and his wife provides him full-time care. It took a long time for them to recognise themselves as somebody that needs care and somebody that provides care. I've seen that journey and what it can mean for a family. So I joined the network to find out what resources were available to support both of them. My brother is disabled, but his wife has taken on that additional responsibility in addition to driving her own career. So it's been a real learning for me. I've learned a lot in a short space of time. I've been doing it for a year now. So with that introduction from myself, I am now going to introduce you to our fabulous panel. So Susan, if I can start with you, please.
Remember to turn off your mute on the mic thing is step number one. Hello, my name is Susan Hewitt. I'd like to thank Luke, Harriet, and Kevin for setting up this webinar because it hits at a thing that's very dear to my heart. I'm a fractional CTO, COO based in Cambridge, UK, and I've held senior roles at a startup where I was the MD and a CTO, and been at ARM, AMD, ATI, Pearson, and Texas Instruments, to name a few. But the reason I'm really here is for the last 20 years, I've also been a carer for my elderly parents, while at the same time trying to bring up my brilliant but challenging autistic and ADHD daughter. For the last 10 years of my parents died just recently. My father died in 2023, late 2023, and my mother in 2016. But for the last 10 years of their life, it was very difficult actually focusing on their direct care. My mother died of complications from a stroke in Northwest England, and I was there for the last 3 weeks of her life, providing the palliative care 24/7 that was needed, and we didn't have a carer that could come in and actually help for that full time. And my father died of the complications from pneumonia after he moved down into a purpose-built flat that we had for him. I am keenly aware of the lack of support, both externally and internally within companies, although I did have a lot of people trying to help me at work, but it is not something that we are prepared for going forward as a country and as more of our people become older. So I'm very keen to see if anything I say can help anybody else in a similar situation. Thank you.
Shall I go next? So I'm Yvonne Pemberton. I head up the HR function for Vist Technology, which is a technology company based in the Southwest. So I have an interest in this subject on a number of levels. We were voted in the top 100 best small UK workplaces to work for by Great Place to Work, which is a great achievement. But there's lots more to do, and I'm keenly aware that there's elements that are missed. And I think the unpaid carer community is one that doesn't get the support that it needs. So I want to see what we can do. But on a personal level, it's something that I have unfortunately now got more experience in. So my mum has advanced Alzheimer's, no memory of who I am or any of my siblings are. And so there's a lot that goes on to care for her. She's now in a care home. My dad has dementia and multiple sclerosis, so mobility issues. He's now in a care home too. And I have power of attorney for both of my parents. So there's been a lot of learning, a lot of additional understanding of the toil that caring takes on individuals. And so I'm keen to understand how, as a business, what other businesses are doing, how we can support our employees and utilize the experience that I've had to help shape how, as a business, we look after people who are unpaid carers, but also hopefully help other businesses to do that in a more productive way.
Thanks, Yvonne. Frantically coming off mute to introduce the next panelist is something I'll be quicker at doing this time, so sorry about that. Thank you for introducing yourself. Robin, if you could go next, please.
Hi, Luke. I'm Robin Furby. I am the mother of two young daughters who have both been recently diagnosed with a specific learning difficulty. I'm also a daughter, and I nursed my father through his heart failure at the end of the pandemic. And now that led to me being a carer for my mother, who was diagnosed with Alzheimer's at the same time as my father got ill. And if that kind of cumulative loss and unpredictable change wasn't quite enough, it all happened to coincide with organizational restructure and redundancy last year, which is a choice I had to make. Since that time, I've looked at setting up on my own. I'm now a business owner with my own consultancy, where I've tried to take everything I've learned about behavioral science and combining it with my knowledge of technology change to help others integrate, whether it be tech and AI or disruptive change into the way that they work. But yeah, I think I've been navigating quite a lot of grief through quite a significant period of time and a period of disruption. So I think when you remove all the different labels that we go under, I think I'm someone who really just likes to understand how things are. And so that drives a passion for learning, which I try then kind of share with others when I can, so I can help them.
Thank you, Robin. And finally, Nick, please.
Thank you very much, Luke. So yes, my name is Nick Blades. I'm the senior management sponsor for the DMO2's employee network, WeCare. And like the majority of the members of the group, I've got caring responsibilities for 3 elderly family members, 3 ladies ranging from the mid-80s to early 90s in age. And one of the trends we're seeing in caring, and certainly in our network, is not only are the people who are caring getting older, like me, but the people we're caring for are getting older, which brings its own specific challenges. I share that caring responsibility with my wife, who mercifully is a registered nurse, so I've got a bit of a head start over some people. But we've been playing an increasing role in looking after these ladies for the last 10 to 12 years, since both of our fathers died in quick succession. And so the reason I got involved with the network really is I've started to realize how much work can be involved in looking after people. I think a large proportion of our carers do over 20 hours of caring a week, which is sort of nearly like holding down another job in relation to in relation to their lives. So last year, my mother-in-law went into a care home. She has dementia, and at Christmas, my mother's sister fell and broke her hip and is now receiving nursing care. So she's bedbound now. But with that and 3 lots of power of attorney over their finances, it is becoming a substantial part-time job in addition to what I do today. But I'm quite lucky in that I have quite a lot of control over my agenda and what happens, and a lot of flexibility. But within our company of 18,000 people, we have field engineers, people in call centers, people who work shifts, and they don't have so much agency and control over what they do. And my sort of involvement with We Care is to try and make sure the company gives them every help that they can to work more flexibly and fit in their caring responsibilities rather than drop out the workforce. Thank you very much, Luke.
Thank you, Nick, and a fantastic job you do of that as well. Nick and I have worked very closely together on data that we've got from the Carers UK State of Care and Employment Survey last year, and excited to share some of that information coming up in Carers Week coming up soon. So yeah, Nick, always appreciate your support, and thank you so much for that. Kevin, if I can just do a quick check-in with you. I know we were going to share some questions in the Q&A if that was possible. Could I just do a quick tech check with you, please?
So we'll get everyone to do the tech check. You should have seen a poll pop up now asking you a question about your reason for joining the call today.
Yes, I can see it. Can I get some nods from the cameras? Yeah.
So people can vote on that. That'd be amazing.
Fabulous.
Beyond that, then hopefully as well, you guys all have access to the Q&A. And in the Q&A, as we go along, you can post any questions that Luke and the panel can then dip into as the time's right.
Thank you so much, Kevin. So that's great. Yeah, we just want to get a sense of why you're here, and it's great to see so many of you on the session. We've also got a live Q&A that we'll come to at the end of the session. So what we'll do now is Harriet and I have a couple of questions that we'd like to discuss with each of the panelists. So I'm going to kick us off. And Yvonne, if I can start with you actually, because you touched on this in your introduction. What are some of the common misconceptions or the unseen impacts of being a carer that you've seen?
Well, on a personal level, so I've got 2 small children, so life is not, I don't have loads of spare time, and it's exhausting trying to navigate the system. And by the system, I mean trying to get power of attorney, trying to utilize that power of attorney, sorting out direct debits. When this first happened, my parents were living together, so it's exhausting, and it's mentally and emotionally exhausting. So there's a lot that you're trying to deal with, and I'm used to fixing things, and this is not a problem I could fix. And when you're a fixer, you kind of you keep trying, and it didn't work. And because it's an ongoing thing, I'm kind of, my mum has in some respects died, but so there's a shell of a woman there who needs looking after. So I'm grieving the loss of my mum, but she's still alive. So you're kind of going through this grief, but also looking after someone who needs your help, but isn't the person that you kind of are used to. So I don't think I've thought about that enough. So I think there's a massive impact. And when you're trying to hold down a job and do all of that, it takes its toll. And the toll it took on me, it sounds like possibly a little bit dramatic, but I feel like I kind of slightly lost myself in just this trying to fix and sort and it just got very tiring. It still is tiring, but I've kind of I've figured it out for the moment a bit. But there was a lot of impact emotionally, physically, mentally, in terms of drain and time and resource.
I have 2 young daughters, as in addition to my younger brother, who I support caring, and I understand what you mean about lost time, and I think sometimes we get feedback and on misconceptions just around being a parent as being a carer, and it's not, right? Like that is it's a different, the different circumstances. Of course, we care and love for our children every day, but the challenges that come with caring for children with certain needs or with disability needs is a different thing. And I think we've found, even at a company as big as ours, some of the surveys that we've conducted, sometimes recognizing yourself as a carer is the first step, right? And I think that's a really important message. So thank you, Yvonne. I'll just invite any of the other panelists to come in and with their thoughts there. You can see Susan coming up. Yeah.
So my father has died, and that's the last of my caring at this point. But I lost myself and my own health doing this. When my mother was still alive, I was driving up to Southport every weekend and leaving at 1 a.m. to stay at the Premier Inn, to then drive into work, straight to work. I spent nights up staying with people that were ill, either my dad or my mum, and then trying to then get on the conference call for the next project that was going on. It basically was a draining, and it was also a loving thing to do, but it physically was draining all around, and that's not just the caring, but also trying to navigate through all the. I remember trying to get carer's allowance paperwork from my dad, who was looking after my mother, and I looked at the 20 or 30 pages, I can't remember how long it is, and I'm going, this is ridiculous. How can anyone in his condition at his point in time with all this stuff going around fill it out? And I was correcting what was done by the council who was trying to help. And there are so many areas, whether it's being the legal stuff, the fighting, and it was a lot of fighting with the NHS, and trying to get medication and trying to get support at various points in time, and also trying to care for adults that can still make decisions, but we're wanting to not infringe on you, but then making a decision that made your life more difficult and more challenging because of them pushing you back at various points and not telling you when they needed help. So it is a very draining activity. I think the only reason I was able to do it was because I was in a position where I could make some of my time and direct it. Being in a senior position, I could actually determine that the meeting was going to be delayed half an hour, whereas other people can't. I think I take my hat off to anyone who can actually do this and be doing it continually, because I know it took a lot out of me. So.
Thank you, Susan.
I think, Luke, I don't know if someone else is jumping in there, or if you want me
Robin,
to kind of go on.
I think, Robin, I'll get your thoughts, and then I'll ask Nick as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I think one of the assumptions I think I kind of came across was that there's generally a view that you take on the role as a carer when you're in a bit of an older stage in life, and that maybe your kids are older, and you've got so you're dealing either with kids or with elderly parents. But that wasn't the case for me. It doesn't sound like it was the case for Yvonne or Susan. And I think a lot of the support systems out there didn't really account for that. There was a lot of support for giving you a break during the day, but nothing that really helped me figure out how I navigated a work life and being a carer, which I think did really have an impact on my own career progress. And I hadn't really expected that. I think I didn't have that as an understanding. I knew that losing my parents would cause grief and loss, but I hadn't really considered the impact that it would have on my own career progress and how it would take me off of the career ladder again. I was in my 30s when I had my daughters, and you can't, not all women, but I think a lot of women kind of consciously kind of just pause a little bit. And it was at the point that I thought that I could start progressing and look to prioritize my career again that my dad got ill. and that my mom's cognitive decline really accelerated. And so it just really threw everything back. So it felt like another frustration. It was another loss that I was having to deal with, whilst I was trying to juggle all of those priorities. And caring for someone with dementia is really unpredictable. You don't really know what's going to happen from one day to the next. When you care for a child, you do at least, and that impacts our career. And I think a lot of people appreciate how much it impacts our career. But with a child, at least you're getting the joy, you're getting all those oxytocin hormones, you get to look at them growing up. But with an elderly person who's declining every day, you're losing someone, which, to one point, you're grieving someone who's this. You're losing all your serotonin as a result. You're dealing with all these cortisol spikes as you try to reason with someone who hasn't actually got any mental capacity to maybe understand. And I think for me, that was a really difficult stage where she wasn't quite ready to be in a home, but she wasn't able to look after herself. And trying to navigate that unpredictability and then the impact that had on me and then my career was a whole wave of emotions that I was just not prepared for.
Thank you, Robin, and thank you for being so open and honest about your experience. I've met you before, and
Yeah.
I really appreciate that honesty, and I think it's great for people to hear that and how you bounced back in such a positive way. Is really inspiring, and it's just been lovely to hear that. Nick, I'll just finish. I know you've got really strong thoughts on this because we speak about this all the time. I'll just finish with you if that's okay.
Thanks, Luke. I suppose one other emotion you would go through is guilt. Quite a lot of guilt. I see lots of nodding heads there. You're trying to balance three things, which is your family, your career, and caring for one or more other people. And you're never going to do any of those to your best of your ability. It's always going to be a compromise. And reflecting what other people have said, my wife was caring for her mother who had dementia, and if you're there every day, you don't notice the small changes. But if you go in once a week, or your sister will visit once a month or something, you're shocked by the change from one period to another. And it's having the courage to step away from it and realizing at one point that you can't go any further, and you have to look for some professional help and move into care. I think that's really sort of emotionally a very difficult thing to deal with. But on the positive side, my wife's come out of that process. She's a people person, but she's come out with a whole set of skills that she never had before. Financial management, risk management, I suppose you'd have to say. Lots of skills that she didn't have. Navigating authority, navigating the state, that she's had to do, and I'm now learning from her. So, with respect to my aunt, so I would say it's a very positive. There can be positive elements to it, as well as a lot of difficulty along the way.
That's a really nice way to finish, Nick, and your answer leading into the next question, actually, which is I'd like each of you just to give us a minute or so on just some advice to people that are living through this. You've all spoken so well about your experiences. So what we want to create for people is an environment of support, and give people advice to individuals that are living through it. So Nick, could you kick us off with that, please?
Yeah, sorry, turn the light back on. I think if you're working with somebody and somebody who's working through who's going through this, just think about how you could support that colleague and whether you could be that early warning, or how tired or drained or emotionally exhausted somebody might be. And I know companies, especially big companies, have a lot of policies around how they would deal with carers, but those policies are really only as good as the manager that's implementing them. And in my experience, that's very variable. I'm lucky in that my boss has the same challenges with his parents, and they're in another country, which makes it even more complicated. But I could imagine that if you don't have a supportive work environment around you, it can be even more stressful than it needs to be. And that's one thing that we've done in this company is implement something called a carer's passport. So if you move jobs within the company, the sort of quality of your manager is taken out of the equation, because the rights and the shift pattern that you work moves with you. and there's no question. So I would, really urge people to think about how they can support their colleagues who are going through this, not just and companies to think about how they make the workplace not just about policies, but about good quality management of what will be an increasing population going forward.
Thank you, Nick. Robin?
I think if I had to go back and give myself advice, it would have been to recognize that this is a phase of life that I need to get through. When I had my daughters, I had 9 months to prepare for becoming a mom, and then I had 9 months to prepare to the adjustment of being a mom, and that was and I had 2 children, so that was 3 years in my life that I was able to adjust to having 1 child and then to having 2 child and to being a working mom. With my mom and taking responsibility, my mom, it was sudden, it was overnight. My dad declined very quickly, and suddenly I had that responsibility. And really, it's taken me 3 years from the point that my dad started to decline to my mom, to getting some kind of stability, that now my mom is in a home and I can kind of predict a little bit the routines in my life. And I wish I'd known that 3 years ago, when I was trying to manage my own expectations. I think I do a lot of research now into kind of the impact of disruption, and the impact of stress on the brain. And I think that loss of control and routine was really disruptive to me. At the same time, you're grieving and trying to prepare for what's about to happen. And I think if I had known that it was what a significant journey was going to be, I think it would have just helped me to prepare and understand that I needed the stamina to kind of get through that phase of life effectively. And the challenge is you can't really predict the trajectory of someone's kind of dementia decline. You don't know how that's going to go. But I think I was probably a bit naive to understanding exactly the level of disruption and change I was absorbing when it all happened to me.
Thank you, Robin.
Yeah.
Susan?
Just remembering the mic again. I think the thing to understand is to try. I would say have time. You're saying goodbye. You do need to say goodbye instead of just there's task after task after task after task that you end up getting yourself caught up into as a carer and trying to fit that in. And yet you still need to say and acknowledge the person that's still there and talk and to be present. I found that difficult to do, but at various points in time, I got to say what I needed to say. And you also need to recognize that to stay away from old arguments and things like that. For instance, my father, I'm in technology because my father was brilliant at maths and science and things like that. And to see that decline with where he couldn't even do the calculations in his head. And I remember one point where I got into an argument. No, it's wrong. And not having to prove myself. I didn't really need to prove myself on those things. You need to stay away from your old arguments and be involved what's there. So those are 2 things I would give people advice. And I'm going to tell you, whatever you do isn't ever going to be enough, but it is also going to be enough. So that's I know that sounds strange, but
No,
you're never
that's
going to
great.
get it. You're never
No, I
going to
think
get
that's
everything
lovely.
done, but
Yeah.
it is enough. Okay.
I
So
think
that's
that's perfect, Susan.
okay.
Doesn't sound strange at all. I think that's absolutely bob on, as Rosie would say if she was here, Nick. Yvonne, if we can just finish with you, please.
One of the best things that I did was to have a very upfront conversation with my manager. And it wasn't something I wanted to do because I'm not a fan of getting emotional in office environments. And it's such an emotive subject. You've got so much going on that it's hard not to. So I kind of shied away from it. But when I did, and I if possible, go with the proposal, look, this is the situation, this is my reality. It just made it so much easier because he was so supportive, and I felt it was literally like a weight had been lifted from my shoulders because he was very supportive. We came up with a plan, and all of a sudden all that stuff that I'd been internalizing and trying to fix wasn't just my burden. He knew what was happening. We had an agreement of how it would work, and that just made my life feel so much easier. The other thing, so that's the work one, and the other thing that's less work is to make time for yourself. It should really, it's always the thing that drops, or often the thing that drops, but I think it should be up there with the eating and sleeping. You should be getting into green space or doing something to just recharge your batteries, because you can't, it is so demanding on so many levels that at some point your batteries will run out, and then you just can't function appropriately and as well as you want to. So really prioritizing just giving yourself some bit of time to recharge can just allow you to continue on, because it's not a sprint. Generally, it's a marathon, and a lot of these situations don't resolve. If they resolve, it's not necessarily a great outcome, but a lot of them are ongoing for a very long time. So you have to top yourself up in order to give to someone else.
Again, very well said. Thank you, Yvonne. I'm going to hand over to Harriet to ask a couple of questions now. Thank you.
Can I just say thank you for sharing all your advice, especially around the impact and having time to process? I think that's so important. And further to what you said, Nick, hopefully people do feel comfortable enough to have those types of conversations with your management, as from what we've seen from lots of different discussions, like having that supportive team around you, and particularly your manager, it makes all the difference. And we also need to normalise these types of conversations, and hopefully like discussions like today really help. So okay, so moving on to the next question then, is how can we support our colleagues that are carers? So as we've heard, there's lots to navigate from an emotional as well as a practical point of view, which can be super unpredictable. So how can colleagues like myself, how can we help and provide that supportive culture? So Robin, if I go to you first, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure. I think to some degree, my colleagues were actually experiencing the impact of the disruption as well, because in that interim phase where they've got the diagnosis, but they're not quite ready to go into a care home, the support that's there, as I kind of alluded to earlier on, doesn't really fit with people who've got a normal day-to-day job, especially when I have kids. So I tried to get care visitors to go around, but she wouldn't let them in the house. She was quite difficult. And I think with someone with dementia, it's quite hard sometimes to reason with them. So then I would have to sometimes go across to sort out an issue that had arisen with the carer. I would try to take her to memory club, but the timings of the memory club was kind of from 10 to 3 and the school days from 9 till 3:30. So I'm trying to fit in the school drop off, the memory club drop off, the memory club pick up, the school pick up. And then my colleagues were having to kind of work around those timelines, and I had very, very supportive and understanding colleagues. And then you add to that the fact that even when she was kind of in a secure environment, I would get phone calls. I would be in a meeting and I would get, no word of a lie, like phone call after phone call after phone call after phone call, asking me something over and over again, or she'd walk straight into a meeting when I was during a call. And I think them being empathetic and understanding that, I think is just kind of key. Is just recognizing that my ability to show up, my performance will actually be quite disrupted, and I can't always predict it, and I might need to drop something halfway, or I might need to, and I would always try and kind of work later to fit it in, sometimes to the detriment of my own kind of well-being. But I think it's hard when everyone hasn't actually got a full understanding of what's involved, and I don't think we educate people on what caring for someone who's elderly with dementia is like, in the same way that we all understand what maternity leave and looking after a baby is like. So I just think their empathy and their perhaps recognition that at times I'm going to have to drop things to be able to respond to the latest emergency probably is as much as I could have asked for from my colleagues at the time, my direct colleagues.
Thanks, Robin. Yeah, empathy is really important here, because you've got so much you need to juggle. And as I said, it was, it can be really unpredictable. Susan, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
Well, so I can come at it also from being the managing director and also from having colleagues. From the managing director role, I had some ability to direct my own time a lot clearer, but I didn't want to take advantage of it from people. But what ended up happening was we ended up with an office that was very caring overall, because there were people with children with disabilities and time where people ended up having to pick up kids. So we would have kind of the meetings that we had were a lot more flexible in terms of making sure that they happened, and support from the people that worked for me, and covering and making sure that when I wasn't able to get there, they would cover for me at various points in time. But that was a truly caring environment, because my boss was in California, the other end of the 8 hours away. So we were able to pull off doing the work still and just slipping it around. So we had a lot of people leaving at 3 o'clock to pick up their kids, and then coming back online at 7. So that worked very well. And when I was at another company where I was driving up and down to Southport, during the original stage of that, the two senior managers had a similar problem recently, and one was working with it, so they were quite flexible with it. But once the management changed, I lost all flexibility, and shortly after that, lost the job. But I have been lucky with, I think it's partially how I've supported other people in their conflict, and also creating an environment where you can actually be flexible. I'm not a nurse where I have to be in somewhere. I'm not a teacher where I have to have the set hours. I can set a lot of my hours, and I think flexibility of that, setting that hours, is crucial. Otherwise, you just can't do this at all. That would be my comment.
Thanks, Susan. So yeah, flexibility again, and that comes down to the company culture. Nick, is there anything around flexibility that you can add to?
I'm actually thinking about something slightly different. My kids ask me, so I've got adult children. My kids ask me, why are you doing all of this stuff? You can get people to come in and do it. And I sort of looked at them and said, well, just watch what I'm doing now, because in 25 years time or 20 years time, that'll be me shouting at your television. So you'll be I'm trying to lead by sort of shadow of the leader type of thing. I'm trying to lead by example. But I was just listening to the conversation. I was thinking, well, actually for my team, they're 10, 15, 20 years younger than me. This is their learning opportunity to watch somebody try and balance all those things. Do it well, do it badly, I don't know. But my reflection would be, I think what Robin said earlier, having children and going through the whole sort of maternity, paternity leave process, that's quite a common experience, right, in the workplace. And just reflection, when I had my children, we didn't have paternity leave. So I think the company owes me about 36 weeks off. But anyway, the point being, society has developed to deal with that and deal with that caring, and it's now very recognized. When I was in my 20s at work, most people's parents didn't live into their 70s. They didn't get dementia because they didn't live long enough. Now they are. And I think our generation is the first generation that's really coming through, trying to do all those things and maintain a work life. And so reflecting on that, that's where companies have got to go. They've got to make the journey that they did on paternity and maternity leave into carers leave, and think about, not only is something somebody does at their end of their career, but they do it, as you said earlier, Robin, it has an end point, and then you come back and you do something else, and you use the skills that you get in the second part of your career. And that's, so I would say to my team, watch what's happening, because that's going to be you. And I would say to companies, you've got to deal with this, and you've got to treat it like paternity, maternity going forward.
Thanks, Nick. How about you, Yvonne?
For me, I think it's partly colleagues understand there might be peaks and troughs. So, like my mum, I'm smirking, it wasn't obviously remotely funny at the time, but she had an end of life emergency in August, all drama. My sister flew over from the States, and then 2 days later she was sat in a chair having a cup of tea. She had another one in December. She'll have another one at some point in the future, and it feels weird. It feels kind of embarrassing when you're like, we've got this emergency, And like, how many times can you say there's an emergency before people go, are you making it up? But you're not. So colleagues understanding that there are peaks and troughs and these things repeat, these patterns, this roller coaster you're on doesn't end very quickly. And so understanding that, I think, is really useful. And that sinking feeling you sometimes get when you get a phone call at work and something has happened. You might go into a meeting room. So your colleagues might, well, what are they doing in there? Are they just chatting to a friend on the phone? Or you might get off the phone and stay in that meeting room because you need to compose yourself. Or you might feel like you need to leave the office. So colleagues looking out for those things and having your back. So knowing that there's going to be a good reason. They might not know that good reason, but having the trust. And I think the language is important. So you touched on culture. Let's say you have flexible working in your office, but if you utilize that, someone goes, part-timer, or leaving early again, but you're actually going off to do something important, that language can really make a difference. So you can support your colleagues by not using the lazy language, which then makes them feel like they can do what they need to do without it impacting their career prospect and their reputation within their team and their business.
I agree. Language is so important for making people feel included and supported. Thank you all. That's given me a lot to think about from a women's network point of view and how we can collaborate more with We Care, just to raise that awareness and give people just, even just an inch of understanding of some of the challenges that carers go through, particularly as you said around the peaks and troughs. And Nick, as you said, and Robin yourself as well, around maternity and paternity care, like people have time to prepare. So how can we improve things for carers? So yeah, that's something that I'm definitely going to take away. Going on to the final question then, before we open up for Q&A. So if anyone has got any questions, please drop them into the Q&A section. But finally, so we're going to look at it from a company point of view. So we've talked about colleagues, but what can companies do to best support their employees that are carers? Robin, do you want to go first again?
Yeah, I think Nick's point on kind of how we think about it in relation to other stages of life is really important. I kind of reflected on this question thinking, actually, I think it's about those policies and protections and how do we make sure we register that someone is in this position and make sure that that is recognized within the organization in some way. When you're going through other organizational change, for me, when redundancy and the restructure happened, I kind of lost my line manager who was very supportive at the time, and I had an interim manager who didn't really quite understand. And I felt like taking redundancy was really the only choice I had at that time, because I was not in any way to respond to a restructure, to go through a new process, whether that was internally or externally at the time. I think so in some ways that kind of leads to quite a longer term disadvantage, because you're not in a position to look for new roles within your organization, and you're kind of just struggling to kind of keep your head above water dealing with what you're dealing with. And so I wasn't really in a position to look externally either. And I think I love the idea that you mentioned, Nicholas, about a kind of a carer passport. Like that would have been something I think I could have really valued and benefited from. I think it's interesting that I was registered by the NHS as a full-time carer, so I had calls from the local doctors to check in on how I was doing, but there was nothing within kind of for me within the work environment that checked in to see where I was and how I was doing and how I was coping with all of that. So I think that for me is something that something I've really taken away, and I think trying to raise awareness and making sure that we recognize it as quite an important stage of life, and perhaps HR departments need to map out when we look at kind of the different stages that we're trying to have policy for and that we're trying to support our staff's well-being for. We need to also think about how different stages of life overlap. So, how does maternity leave get impacted by organizational restructure? But then how does kind of caring also get impacted by that? That's something that I think organizations can definitely think about and look at how they address.
Thanks, Robin. Yvonne, do you want to go next?
Yeah, I could talk about this for hours, so I'm really going to try not to. It got mentioned before that culture is so important, and in my opinion, culture is more important than policy. You can have all the best policies in the world, but if you make people feel like using them is going to be to their detriment, you might as well have not written it. So that to get a good culture, you have to have trained your managers. They need to know what good looks like, and you need your employees to understand what they can expect, so that if they don't get that level of support, they know who to speak to and it gets changed. But you also have to have the policy. So we have quite a flexible approach, but we set a flexible working policy up. And someone said, oh, I'm so pleased you did that, because I now, like, I've got a child starting preschool, and so now I can do X, Y, Z. In my opinion, I presume someone would just say, please, can I change my working hours? But he didn't feel like he could until there was a policy that said, this is how you go about doing it. So you've got to have both. And I think for businesses, working with people as individuals, just in this forum and in some of the points that are coming through, we all have our own experiences, but understand that is not the experience. It is either you have no experience, or your experience is based on your situation. You might have more or less support. The requirements on your time will be different. So treating your employees as individuals, working with them. And if you're nervous about it, agree the check-ins, agree the expectations, agree when your next check whether the support is working or whether there's changes, means that as employers, you know what is going to happen. As an employee, you know what to do if that's not working. And I think that kind of mix of culture and policy and making sure people are aware and treating them as individuals it's a very good start. If we all did that as HR departments, which is why I find this subject, why I could talk for ages on it, it's just going to make such a difference to so many people's outcomes in terms of whether they can stay in work and be happy doing it as well, not just doing it because they have to, but feeling like they are being productive, having a good career, and they have responsibilities outside of that.
Yeah, I think that's really key. You've got to have policies and the culture to support the policies to be able to have those open, honest conversations with management.
Yeah, it's
Susan,
just very quickly, sorry, Harriet, it's just so
It's all
well
right.
said from Yvonne, and I think it's one thing having the resources, the policies in place. It's another thing people having the awareness, and we, a company our size, that's our biggest challenge actually. As we can put all of these great measures and policies and resources in place, but if people don't know they exist, then it's wasted, right? So it's spreading that awareness all the time is the big challenge for all businesses, I think.
Thanks, Luke. I'm just conscious of time, so we did want to open up for Q&A. Nick, in terms of the final question around what companies could do best.
Well, I think we actually had a point in the chat that we've been talking quite a lot about elder care. There are people who are be caring for their children or their siblings for a very long period of time, and that might be their entire career. And just a reflection from our survey, we reckon there are about 1,200 employees in the company who work a full-time job and do over 21 hours of caring a week. So that's a very difficult situation to balance. And I think my plea to companies and to managers and to colleagues is, if you change everything at the last minute, you cancel that meeting, you move that date, it's really difficult for people who've got this, life set out like this to balance all of these requirements. It's really difficult for them to adjust. And so, just have a little bit more forethought about the impact on those 1,200 people in our case, than the impact on the general population, because it could have a huge beneficial impact on their life and their caring for whoever it is they're caring for, if they have that sort of continuity of time at work, and understanding that there are bounds within which they're going to be asked to work, but they're not going to be forced to step outside those bounds. I think that's will be hugely important to getting people to enjoy the work so much more.
Thanks, Nick. You're completely right. Everyone needs to be more aware of sort of last minute changes and being more flexible. Susan, shall I pass over to you?
So I come from deep tech, where they hire the top 10% and they try and get people pushing, and then they change people in and out every 3 years, and there's kind of like this driving need to get things done. That's a difficult environment to adapt to this type of thing, and I don't think I would have been able to adapt to I didn't succeed with my mother's death. At the end, I lost that position going forward, and I don't think without COVID and having people work at home, I would have been able to deal with my father's function. And now there's the drive going back, everybody to the office and being present and FaceTime, and you need to be in the office. I think and I hate to say it, we're moving from a culture that is less accepting of people being flexible and supporting all of these different needs. Certainly when you come from a company where they're saying we only want the top 10% and we want to cut the bottom and cull and do all these types of things, I see it as a challenge to go forward. The companies can create an environment where they are flexible enough so that people can be around, but it has to be something that the culture of that company wants to do. And there are a lot of technology companies that have a drive, and you must get things out on time. And I maybe I'm just being negative here, but I see it as a hard slog through. I feel I got lucky in that I got a couple of people that in my technology and towards the end of my mother's life who really understood, and I'd already proven myself as being very, very useful. When the second thing that came around, I was also towards the end of my career at the startup I had, and it's very hard to, but it was successful because we had COVID and everybody was working at home, and my father died in 2023. I think I got lucky in the business that I'm in, and don't think I could have stayed in the business that I'm doing with deep tech, etc., if I hadn't had those couple of instances. So there's a lot we need to do, and I think technology is not there yet in terms of supporting women who are actually doing key technology roles and driving forward things. I don't see that. I feel like we stepped a little bit further back in the last couple of years. So maybe that's a negative statement, but that's what I'm seeing right now out there. Anyway. So yes, it can be done, but it also is something we have to decide to do. And
thanks, Susan. Thanks, everyone. Like hearing lots of reoccurring themes here around awareness, company culture, having those policies that can support. So, Nick, you mentioned the carer's passport, which is amazing, and that can help people further their career. I think we're at that time now for Q&A. Have we got any? I haven't got access to the Q&A, Kevin.
So I wonder if the Q&A is working because there's no post in there, but people have used the chat. So people can continue to use the chat. And if anybody wants to, I think you might be able to unmute yourself and ask questions as well. So put your hand up if you do. We do have a question in from Michelle, which says, in an initial crisis period of supporting a dependent through hospital and now into care at home, what in your experience has been the approach to leave and pay? Can you guys see that in the chat?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have any takers for that one? I was going to come to you, Yvonne. Oh, I can see Susan putting her hand up though.
So
I went straight to HR, Yvonne. Apologies.
The first one. No, it's fine. Whichever way.
Yeah, you go, Susan.
The first one was at a very high tech firm. I slipped in and out. So I would go and do the thing, and yet I'd be on the call and things like that. my time was given to me free until my mother died, and then 3 weeks later I was let go. 3 weeks after the funeral, I was let go. On terms, so I was lucky there, but I also was considered to be high ranking and necessary, and I was on a fast track. Once that stopped, I got through that issue, then I lost that position type thing. So I was paid for it. At that particular point in time, I did see other people not getting paid and then having to take time in lieu. But I think I got lucky. That was with the two gentlemen that were really supporting of that role. So I think it depends on your boss and what they're prepared to do for you, and the rules of the company, and how flexible they are. So that's my comment on that.
Thanks, Susan. Hi, Robin.
Hi, I was going to add to that I think for me, I was similar to Susan, but I was on a kind of senior leadership training program at the time. So I had quite a lot of high profile activities that I had going on, which I'd entered into before. I knew that my father was kind of going to go and my mum had declined as she did. And so I had a number of kind of high profile pieces of work that I felt if I didn't deliver according to that would impact my ability to progress. And then with kind of as the changes within the organization, the restructure kind of emerged, I felt like it would put me at risk. So I didn't really almost entertain taking the space and time because I felt like I needed to do the work in order to survive. I think if I could go back and tell myself something different now, I think I would have liked to have, I wish I could have go back and maybe look at what options for leave there were. That was not something that was presented to me or a conversation I had, but I think in hindsight, that probably is something I would have explored.
Thanks, Robin.
And
and Yvonne, sorry, you go, and then I'll
make it really quick.
Yeah.
I think there's an element of the size of business. In a smaller business like we are, we would generally support employees through those things, but there's always going to be a limit, which is where earlier I said I think it's good to have those conversations and the check-in points. This is what we'll do, and this is when we'll check in. If you have got legal rights to take unpaid leave for emergencies, if you don't want to take unpaid leave, can you come up with a proposal that says, I need this, and this is how I'll manage my workload. I can work different hours, or I would like to utilize some annual leave, or I would like to bank those hours for a period of time and speak to your employer. So if you come with proposals and solutions as much as you can, your employer knows you're not taking the mick. You're trying to deal with the situation. There isn't a magic fix on it. Is very company and culture dependent, which I can see in one of the comments. A lot does come down to culture, but if you're in the right kind of company, hopefully you can influence that culture.
Thank you so much, Yvonne. And thank you, everyone. I can't believe we're out of time. We've got quite a lot of questions in the chat, so if it's okay, Kevin, we'll collate them as a team, and if it's okay, panelists, I'll maybe send them out after the call, and if you can just give me some of your answers, I can put them into a little pack that we can send out to the attendees here, so we can make sure that we've addressed the questions. It's been such a great session. I can't thank the panelists enough. I think you've all been phenomenal, so honest, and given so much insight and support. These are sometimes quite tough sessions. You know, we're talking about really hard experiences here. And what Harriet and I wanted was to, you know, give people advice and support and you know, a good forward look into how we can tackle these issues, because they're not going away. As many people have said, you know, this is something that's going to become society a bigger problem, right? We have an aging population. We are going to be caring more. You know, Nick speaks about it so well. And you know, just I hope to keep in touch with the panelists today, and in terms of doing more for the sessions. I think Harriet touched on that earlier, that this will be the first of a series for Kevin. So huge thank you to Kevin for making this possible. Huge thank you to everyone that's joined the session today. I will send out a list of the answers that we've come up for the questions. But it's just been a great session, and just a massive thank you to me and from Harriet for you guys joining today. It's been much appreciated.
Yeah, I'll mirror those comments. Thank you, Luke, for your input to this, mate. I will send everybody that's attended and signed up the recording, and in doing that, I'll also ask if anyone's got any questions that they want to feed back in, so that we can make sure everyone gets everything covered off.
That's so good. Thank you, Kevin.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Thanks,
everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.